namaskar, and hello. Welcome to Climate Change Beyond Outrage, where we go beyond outrage to focus on solutions to climate problems facing people, nations, and the world. I am your host, Anu Hittel, broadcasting live from ThinkTech Studios in beautiful downtown Honolulu. Though, of course, today it looks like we're on the beach. There are many ways for you to get talking with us. You can join our conversation by tweeting us at ThinkTechHI. And now you can call us at 415-871-2474. Once we are done with the show, don't feel bereft. Join our conversation on our Facebook page of the same name, Climate Change Beyond Outrage. One of the undeniable effects of climate change is that climate events are becoming more frequent and more intense. El Niño exacerbated these effects last year. Extreme high temperatures in India, 123 degrees Fahrenheit this week, are just the beginning for this year. Well, whatever we call them, climate change events or whatever else, they cause a great deal of damage, and they are happening. They are here. The question is, how do human communities deal with these events and adapt to them? In this, our last episode of the season, I have with me in the studio today someone who works on just such issues. Oceana Puananile Francis was born and raised on Oahu, Hawaii, and has lived in the contiguous United States and Alaska. Her professional engineering experience includes 13 years of working in the polar and tropical regions with projects in coastal areas, oceans, freshwater, stormwater, wastewater, groundwater, and more. Oceana, welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for having me on the show.
So you are a professor at University of Hawaii, and you're in the engineering department there, in the engineering college. And you work on waves and vulnerability assessments and adaptation. Mm-hmm. So we're going to explore in this episode, you're going to take us through all of these things. And of course, the first question that comes to mind for me is your name a coincidence?
Being born and raised in Hawaii, my father was in the Navy, U.S. Navy, and then my mother was native Hawaiian, so they had the big love for the ocean. So sometimes people say you are what you're named.
And so, of course, it was natural for you to just go into making waves.
Yes, yes.
And so how did you, I guess it's an indirect way of me asking you, how did you get into this? What motivated you into getting into this kind of work? And what exactly do you do?
Okay, well, what motivated me was growing up around the ocean, actually having a love for physics. I really, and also engineering, civil engineering, I was really drawn to that. So I ended up majoring in physics, civil engineering, atmospheric science, and then specializing pretty much in coastal engineering. So
and so what you do is really interesting. What I'd like to do is just jump into the videos that you sent us, and then maybe you can explain what's happening, because you're collecting this information, you're taking information, you're then looking at you tell me, you're looking at sort of vulnerabilities and then figuring out solutions for people, right?
Yes.
Basically. So with that data collection, I mean, maybe that's something that you can talk to us about when we're looking at the videos.
Okay, yes.
Yeah? Okay.
So that's one part that the videos will showcase. So,
okay. Yeah. And so when we get the videos lined up, we'll get that going.
Okay.
It looks like here it is. So where are we here?
So here, this is in the Arctic, specifically the Chukchi Sea. We're deploying an RDCP, recording Doppler current profiler. This is, I believe, back in 2008. So there's 2 pop-up buoys on there. This is going to be lowered to the seafloor. And the Chukchi Sea shelf is it's pretty shallow in that region compared to the Hawaiian region, where you have basically mountains coming out of the ocean, and it's very steep gradient towards the bottom of the ocean. So this is out quite far, and it showcases pretty much like the climate involved. It's pretty cold, as you can see.
Right, so I noticed
And-
there are no divers in there and so on. It's just you're lowering this this instrument
Yes.
into the seafloor. And
Yes.
what does it measure? What does it do?
So it measures waves, full wave spectrum, and then also the current velocity of the water column.
So
So-
full wave spectrum, what does that mean?
Full wave spectrum, it measures wave height. So specifically, it can collect significant wave height. You have the ability to put it in either acoustic or pressure-based mode. And then, specifically, it was in acoustic measuring. So it was measuring full wave direction.
Okay, and then you're also saying it measures the water column, or it looks at some metrics along the water column.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
Okay.
basically, the U and V components of the water velocity.
Okay, now you're being
Along the
very
column.
engineering-like. So, so we're going to go right into the second video, which is, so it's interesting. You work in the Arctic. You also work in Hawaii, and so you've worked in all kinds of waters. I mean, from cold to warm. So when we go into that second video, what's happening here? This is
Okay, so this is a diver-assisted boat deployment again. So, and we ended up rolling the ADCP. We used an similar to the RDCP. It's an acoustic Doppler current profiler, which measures full wave spectrum and current velocity.
okay.
So it was lowered, pretty much rolled off the boat because we didn't have a crane, and then the divers went ahead and descended with it to make sure that it was upright.
Okay.
So we had instrumentation to make sure it was upright in Alaska, but for this one, the divers had to make sure that it was upright because we didn't have the equipment attached to it. So it was kind of a little homemade job that we ended up deploying.
Okay.
And then Kirk really helped with that effort, the Ko'olawe Island Reserve Commission, to help with all the logistics.
Right.
And then
okay.
Foss Maritime, and they really helped with the logistics of the Alaska one. So
Okay.
I just wanted to acknowledge
Yes.
them.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
And so you put these instruments down on the ocean floor.
Mm-hmm.
Then what happens?
So then it begins timing. It begins recording at a certain time. You can program it to record, and then it's powered by a battery. You can either use lithium or alkaline, and then it stops recording. It collects data onto like an SD card, and then when it's done, you can pick it up. Or whatever you want to retrieve it.
And so that's your work, sort of what you call in situ, in the field.
In the
right?
field,
So you're
yeah.
collecting this information in the field. Then where do you take this information? What do you do with it?
So the information gets collected, and it's actually used to really validate what we do with modeling. So basically what I do a lot of wave modeling, hydrodynamics modeling. So
which is the movement and velocity and the force of these waves?
yeah.
So you're looking at all those components?
Yes. So you're looking at what is exerted onto the waves, and then also how the waves force another object, or interact with the infrastructure, for instance.
Right. So like a seawall
or a
or a
structure.
house
Yes.
or something, or a beach or a dune.
Yeah.
So and we'll get to that as you get into your vulnerability assessments.
Okay.
But could we go into some of the tools, the other tools you use, some of your lab measurements and things? Could you take us through some of that as well?
Yes.
Okay, so we'll look at some of the pictures that you sent us.
Okay, so these are on the middle panel, you'll see a weather station. It's really, although usually we use gridded wind with global reanalysis, and also downscaled wind, it's really nice to have an in situ weather station located in the area that you're collecting. Usually, you can have it on a buoy offshore, but for this one, we put it on the land to collect wind data. And then also, it can collect anything precipitation you can set it up for. And then on the right panel is a centimeter. that measures erosion and accretion.
So it sort of collects sediment.
It doesn't collect sediment, it just measures
it.
Yeah, measures like the level of how it's increasing or decreasing, and turbidity. So.
I see, okay. And of course the one on the left is one of those things that you popped off the boat, right?
Mm-hmm, yes.
Yes. in such technical language, right? Okay. And then so you've got these other measurements that are in situ, meaning in the field, these other instruments, and then you take this to the lab. And what happens there? So if we can look at that next slide.
Okay. So actually the laboratory, we have a hydraulics laboratory at University of Hawaii, and it's pretty much, I actually run the lab, but a lot of departments utilize it, mechanical engineering, ocean and resources engineering. They utilize the lab quite a bit as well. To do and use the wave flumes. We actually have 2 wave flumes, and we have instruments in there. For instance, the PIV and LDV, and those measure the velocity of what's happening in the flow field. So
are you creating waves here in the lab?
Yeah.
Okay.
So waves are created. You have like a wave paddle, which pushes the waves and generates the waves. These tend to be, and a wave gauge is attached on the top. These tend to just be monochromatic waves.
Okay.
Not so what this is really good for is simulating more like, I guess, micro scale processes, I would say. What the ADCPs are very good for is for measuring macro scale processes out in the field.
Right.
But this tends to be more micro scale.
Okay, and so you get this information and you take the micro scale and do you integrate it with the macro scale and do something with that?
Yeah, so it depends what we're testing.
Okay.
So for instance, if we're testing, say, the bottom roughness of, say, a coral reef, and how waves are generated over that, the laboratory would be a good setting for that. Whereas if we're interested in understanding, the synoptic processes which generate swells, say in the Pacific Ocean, an ADCP would be good for that, for instance.
For the big things.
Yeah, for the big things.
Yeah. Now, you also do, obviously, you take some of this information and you create models and to help you predict and analyze some of the interactions of waves and infrastructure and so on, right? Yeah. So, I mean, what are we looking at here? It looks like a lot of technical stuff.
So pretty much with field work, it's very expensive, and we can only collect so much because you can only have batteries running collecting data for so long. What the in situ measurements really help do is to validate our modeling studies, and now that we have satellite. We also use satellite altimeter radar in order to do validation with the model as well. So satellite altimeter radar, we use that a lot. There's significant, pretty much for significant wave height. It generates that and gives that. And then the modeling, pretty much the input parameter for these is wind. For these types of models that I'm showing you. So there's WAM, SWAN, WaveWatch 3. They're basically the same. SWAN is a near shortwave model, but they all use wind as their input in order to generate what's happening with the waves. Yeah.
Okay, and so you take this information. So you're making models out of the various sort of inputs that you've got from different sources, and you're making these models, and you're modeling different things like, what, like you said, looking at the roughness or maybe what impact waves will have on different kinds of infrastructure and so on. And this is where climate change sort of comes in, I suppose, for you, which is, where is that intersection between what you're collecting and then moving on to looking at climate change?
So the biggest impact is actually surface gravity waves, which when they hit the shore, they cause the greatest impact And they're kind of at a shorter time scale than, say, like internal waves or different kinds of waves. So there's many different types of waves, but surface gravity waves are the ones that you see, which are generated from the hurricanes that Hawaii feels, for instance. And then this slide right here, what we're trying to do currently is we're trying to do an improved wave analysis using data assimilation. So model data, as I said, is really, I mean, the input, if you don't have such good input, wind input, it's not going to, your model data, your results not going to be good. And in situ data is limited, so assimilating the two can produce a better data set. So this is what we're trying to do with this.
So you're trying to do this for the Hawaiian Islands at
Currently,
this point?
yeah.
Okay.
Right.
So with that, we will we'll just stop for a brief break, and we'll be back, and we'll actually talk about how you use these models to conduct some of your assessments, looking at the sort of what are the risk factors and so on, and then what you do about it, right?
Okay,
and this is why I love engineers, because they always have something that they want to do about it. There's always a solution, an engineering solution to things. So don't go away. We'll be right back after the break.
I'm Jay Fidel, and I'm the host of Research in Manoa, Mondays from 12 to 1 on thinktechhawaii.com. Take a look at us and learn about geophysics, learn about planetology, learn about the ocean and earth sciences at UH Manoa. You'll really enjoy it. So come around. We'll see you then.
You're watching Think Tech Hawaii, offering lifelong learning from passionate hosts and fascinating guests ready to explore and explain Hawaii's place in the 21st century. Great content for Hawaii from Think Tech.
Hi, I'm Kili'i Akina, president of the Grassroot Institute. I'd love you to join us every week, Mondays at 2 o'clock p.m. for E Hana Kako. Let's work together. We report every week on the good things going on in our state, as well as the better things that can go on in the future. We have guests covering everything from the economy, the government, and society. See you Mondays on E Hana Kako at 2 o'clock p.m. Until then, I'm Kili'i Akina. Aloha.
Welcome back to Climate Change Beyond Outrage, and I'm here in the studio with Oceana Francis, a professor at University of Hawaii and in the College of Engineering. And she works on wave impacts from, she's worked in Alaska, she's working on these issues in Hawaii, and really looking at how to deal with these impacts, especially as climate change events get more severe, more intense. This is becoming more and more relevant to our world here, which is surrounded by water, but even in other places, this is of course very relevant. So if we could just, Oceana, if you can tell us a little bit about that process where you go from data to adaptation, and you're talking about collecting information and so on, and then doing your vulnerability analyses, and then back to adaptation. So if you could just sort of take us a little bit through that process, and maybe we can talk about your work in Alaska.
Sure. State of Hawaii has actually issued recently, they set up this website, a Hawaii Climate Adaptation Portal. And so this is, and Alaska is following suit as well, the higher latitude. So pretty much one of the first things you do, after you collect the data, you identify the climate stressors, and then you go into assessing the vulnerability. And then, so you have built infrastructure, ecosystem, and societal vulnerabilities. And then you go ahead and look into trying to provide an adaptation. Okay. And then it lists identifying, planning, prioritizing, analyzing, and measuring. Okay. And then the engineering comes into place, where we try to use best management practices, low impact development, in order to effectively mitigate against the onslaught of whatever climate change issue is happening to the infrastructure.
Right, whether it's erosion or flooding or whatever,
yes,
right?
Yes.
So, okay, and so let's go on to looking at some of the work that you've done in Alaska. Now, you've worked with communities there to pull together some of their adaptation, some of their, I guess, the adaptation measures, right? That
Yes.
they would eventually need to take.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So tell us about Kivalina, Alaska. What was it like to work there? And were you cold all the time for someone from Hawaii,
So yeah, the Kivalina, Alaska is one of the typical examples of many coastal Alaskan villages which are being inundated by storm surge. I had the privilege to work with the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers in the Alaska District up there with the relocation planning project. So we came out with a feasibility study and then also a master plan.
So this is relocating a village?
Mm-hmm. So it's basically, it's similar, as you can imagine, the conditions, say, in a lot of these coastal communities are very similar to, say, the low-lying, areas where there's no mountainous regions in the Pacific, for instance. So
Like some of the atoll islands?
some of the atoll islands, for instance. So, however, Alaska has a lot more land.
Yes.
So they don't have to move very far. So what we've been trying to look at with a lot of these communities is moving them, not so that they can preserve their way of life, but to move them a little bit further inland.
And we're moving them because of impacts from the ocean?
Yeah. So basically, their entire community will be completely wiped out in, say, 20 years. And the effects actually of climate change are even more noticeable than in the lower latitudes. The lower latitudes, the climate change, you don't have permafrost, for instance. Up in the high latitudes, you do. And then when that degrades, that permafrost, the soils liquefy because it's kind of a silty clay soil, which just completely, and the permafrost really holds it together. So once that melts,
It's like building on quicksand.
pretty much, yeah. So you want to try to keep things frozen, but with the rising temperatures of climate change, that's really hard. So the communities up there are facing a lot of
Right, so it's not just encroachment from the sea, but also just the warming of the soils and then that disappearance of that permafrost. So, okay, and so you worked with this community?
Yes, so I worked with this community, and then we came up with the cost of what it would take to relocate the community. We also, as you can see, it's very expensive. This is a community of about 380 people. So the cost to relocate 380 people, as you can see, it's 150, 250 million. To improve their existing site would be 126 million. So we came up with three alternatives: was either to do nothing, improve Kivalina, or to move the village to one of the 6 new sites.
To improve would be 196 million.
Yes.
Yeah? And then to do nothing, you've actually got no costs associated, but I would argue that there are actually costs associated with doing nothing, right, for them?
Yeah.
I mean, they may not be, it may not be possible to actually put a cost to those things, but, their loss of livelihood and things like that, I would imagine, and damage to their,
Yes.
right? So
Yeah,
to do nothing would actually, I would say, would actually have a big cost as well.
Yes.
So is that something that was, anyway, so that's a different sort of, we'd go off on a tangent if we worked on that one. But so what eventually ended up happening with this community?
So I don't think they've moved to a new site. So I haven't followed up because I've been so busy with Hawaii, and I moved off the project.
Right.
But I think that they're still undergoing a lot of erosion. Basically, on that cover, you saw this. They're living on a little narrow strip, right, of land. So pretty much every time there's a huge storm that comes through, say in 2004, 2007, 20 feet of their coastline gets taken away. So and a lot of these other communities are the same way. So it just they're just trying to make do what they can, but the problem is that the state of Alaska, they won't fund sanitation or other projects for these communities that are going to be wiped off in say 20, 30 years. So this is one of the another reason also to in order to try to relocate the community, and that's why a lot of community members were interested in it. So
Right, so they're still probably debating what their alternatives are and what they should be doing and things like
Yeah.
that, yeah. So in general then, you look at different vulnerabilities, right? You're looking at it from the effects it has on infrastructure, which means on things that are built. You're looking at what else?
So you're looking for vulnerabilities. Built infrastructure is a big one for us engineers because we're interested in protection of the roads, buildings,
Right,
bridges.
right.
But there's also societal vulnerabilities, and then and that's a big one. A lot of social scientists and planners deal with those types of issues.
And that would be like what effect it has on their livelihood and their culture, and if there are any cultural artifacts or anything like that.
Yes, exactly. So how does society, how does the community, how does it impact their health and their livelihood?
Right.
You know, how does climate change affect that?
Right.
And then there's the other one too, which we mentioned. So
The-
outdoor infrastructure and
with the
ecosystem.
ecosystems, right.
So ecosystem is another one that's of great interest also to a lot of scientists. Biologists, geologists would be very interested in understanding the ecosystem vulnerabilities.
Right.
So that would include shoreline change.
Right, looking at dunes, stabilizing dunes. We did some of that with one of our episodes. We're looking at dune stabilization at Bellows Air Force Station.
Yes, yeah, and then also the marine life sanctuary districts, with
Right.
all the marine habitat.
Right.
That's a part of the ecosystem as well.
Right, so it's a very
maintaining-
interdisciplinary team that works on vulnerability assessments.
Yeah.
And do you look at these other things too, or do you primarily focus on the infrastructure, the built infrastructure?
I look at it to a certain degree.
Okay.
So seeing how a marine, say a marine area is vulnerable, but I tend to, for my research, I tend to really focus in on built infrastructure more, but a little bit of the ecosystem when I'm getting to do more sciencey type
Right,
work. So.
right.
yeah.
Okay, well, we'll have to take a quick break, but when we come back, let's talk a little more about the vulnerability equation, what goes into it, and then how that all pans out into adaptation measures for climate change. So don't go away. We'll be back.
Hello, I'm Crystal from Quack Talk. I've got a new show here. You've got to tune in. Check out my topics on sensitive, provocative female issues. So Tuesday mornings, 10 o'clock. Don't miss it. It's going to be fun and dangerous.
Aloha, this is Reg Baker. I'm the host of Business in Hawaii. We air every Thursday at 2 o'clock on thinktechhawaii.com. We broadcast from the ThinkTech studios in downtown Honolulu, and we talk about positive and successful companies in Hawaii. People that have been successful despite the obstacles. They all have a good story to tell. Hopefully we'll see you on Thursday at 2 o'clock. Aloha.
Aloha, I'm Kaui Lucas, host of Hawaii is My Mainland, here on ThinkTech Hawaii every Friday at 3 p.m. We address issues of importance for those of us who live here on the most isolated landmass on the planet. Please come join me Fridays at 3 p.m. Mahalo.
Hi, I'm Chris Leatham here with Think Tech Hawaii, and I invite you to watch my show, The Economy and You, each Wednesday at 3 o'clock here in Hawaii on OC16. We look forward to seeing you. Aloha.
Aloha, welcome back to Climate Change Beyond Outrage. And I'm in the studio here with Oceana Francis. We're talking about waves and their impact on built infrastructure, on natural infrastructure, and on society in general. And the effects of climate change, of course, exacerbate all of these. So we're talking about how Oceana, so we've talked about vulnerabilities, the places where people or infrastructure and so on are at risk. And how do you factor all of those things in? Could you explain to us how you work through a vulnerability assessment and then how that works out to, yes, we're going to take these measures now?
Okay, well, pretty much it can be summed into the vulnerability equation. where you have vulnerability, and it's a really good little flow chart, which kind of gives you an idea. You have exposure to the environment, plus the sensitivity, what's the degree of impact level of stress, minus the ability to cope. You take out the ability to cope, the adaptive capacity, and you're left with vulnerability.
Okay, so give us an example, like when you say exposure, when and where duration. So what are you talking about with exposure?
Okay, so exposure, so the work, for instance, that I do with looking at, say, how hurricanes or tropical cyclones, extratropical cyclones generate waves into the coastline, the coast surface structure. That coast surface structure is exposed to that. So I would say that's part of that equation. And then also the sensitivity would come into play when you have if the structure, say, is not, if it's, say, on ground level, if it's old infrastructure, if it's not built properly, it's going to become damaged more than if it's able to handle the impacts. And then and then also adaptive capacity, ability to cope. So, so the equation that kind of formulates it. So,
Okay,
yeah.
okay. And then you get sort of basically your vulnerability from that. And so tell us what is going on with these, where you're looking at the scope and you're gathering data and so on. What is going on with that? How does that all feed into your assessment?
Okay, so for and we already talked about how to assess the vulnerability on that, but it's just 4 steps where you go ahead, determine the scope and the goal, and then figuring out what the climate stresses are you want to deal with. Go ahead and gather the data and the expertise, and then you apply you assess your vulnerability, and then you apply the assessment results. So pretty much each agency in the federal government, state, are all coming out with their own methods for doing assessments, but they're generally the same. They have the same format, the same tool that they use.
Okay,
to do it, so.
Okay, and so you're working here in Hawaii with some agencies and so on, doing vulnerability assessments and things like that as well, right?
Yeah.
Okay, and we'll talk about that in a second once you've had a chance to tell us a little more about adaptation measures and so on. So this assessment then feeds into what, and where does it go?
So the assessment, we use that in order to deliver adaptation actions. So and there's pretty much 4 methods you can use in order to deliver the adaptation actions. You can accommodate, protect, and retreat, and then also exploit opportunities that may exist from it.
Okay, so let's talk about each of those.
Okay.
So when you accommodate, and that's really, you're talking about you just living with that with that water, right?
Right. So accommodating, you're basically staying put. You're gonna keep your structure there, and live with the water. So we look at improving, flood control, producing in order keep the structure there so people are still there. You're going to produce maybe some green space that people can live by. You go ahead and elevate if you need to, if there's sea level rise happening, for instance. So.
Okay, so you've accepted, yes, the water is here and I'm not moving, and what am I going to do about it?
Yes.
Okay, all right, so you're accommodating. Then there's another strategy, which is you try and figure out how to keep that water out. Okay, and that is?
So protecting, where you go ahead and you basically put up your traditional hard protection, or you can also use a natural, softer approach in order to prevent the water from damaging the infrastructure. And I put this figure in here because I thought it was really interesting in the LA Times, where homeowners are actually having to pay for sand replacement. So in order to live there. So it's the price for staying put.
But trying to keep the water out.
Yes.
So what we're seeing is a seawall? Is that what we're seeing behind them?
Yes.
Okay.
So
And so
just-
is it because of the seawall that you're finding that there's more erosion there, or?
Yeah,
Okay.
so what we've been finding is and this most engineers and scientists know about this, is that when you put a seawall or any kind of structure, and depending on the soil conditions and then the water flow, the hydrodynamics around the water, it pretty much would cause scouring to occur and soil to basically move away from the wall. So what you don't want is you don't want the structure to topple over. So even though they're very, very deep, if sediment moves away from the structure, you're going to lose that structure eventually. So.
Right. So that's an interesting observation, and one that we've been finding over a long period of time now, that where we've had seawalls and so on, the hardening of the shoreline is what it's called, and it's something that has really affected erosion and taken away land essentially from that area. And so then where you're looking at even Waikiki, there are areas where they need to come back and replenish the beaches and so on, right?
Yeah.
So that would be a really interesting thing in the future if like hoteliers and so on had to actually pay to get that beach replenished, right? I mean, because that's kind of what we're looking at this point.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah, so that's something that may happen in the future. It's kind of, an interesting, interesting thing into insight into all of this. So, and let's talk a little bit about the moving away from the water, which is a little more difficult in a place like Hawaii, but certainly is an option in the contiguous United States. We've got a whole big Midwest, actually, that people could move to.
Yes.
I just wanted to put that in there because I lived in Missouri for so long. So, but here in Hawaii, of course, that's not necessarily an option always. And so, what is your thought about retreat, and could you explain a little more about that?
So retreat, moving away from the water, is actually really a long-term solution. Especially if you're dealing with sea level rise, and it's going to encroach no matter what you do. Storm surge, you can definitely try to protect it, but if sea level rise, it's going to cause flooding and then basically inundate a community. So, and especially if you have a lot of land, retreating is a really viable option and very encouraged. Engineers very much encourage this option. And you build your community somewhere else. You move the buildings or the road inland. You don't have to move it that far, but just up in elevation,
Right.
for instance. So,
Yeah.
so this is a good one if you have two things: public acceptance. That's probably the biggest hurdle, and it also costs a lot of money. So to relocate,
Right.
it's probably one of the biggest expenses to
So
build new.
are you working with the state of Hawaii on, there's been an act passed by the legislature. They're looking at climate change effects. They formed a committee, the Interagency Climate Adaptation Committee, which is looking at focusing on sea level rise. They have to give a report to the legislature by 2017 as to what kinds of things can happen. I know that University of Hawaii, many of the scientists have been modeling these things for a while, trying to figure out, what the water effects will look like, not just the bathtub model, but the wave inundation models and so on. Are you working with any of those things to here closer to home?
So University of Hawaii Sea Grant College Program is really heavily involved in that. I'm actually, I have a part appointment with them. So in a way, I'm kind of working under the umbrella of that. Myself and 6 other faculty are working on sustainability issues. We're from different departments. And I'm from the College of Engineering department. So we pretty much kind of work on our own research disciplines to help towards that goal. But I would say definitely I'm working with an agency who's working towards that goal. So,
Right.
yeah.
Okay. And so you're doing this work right here in Hawaii as well, which is very exciting and interesting, because that's really what I really like about about engineers is that, you know, you really do have a way of there are solutions, specific solutions that you look at. It's very solution oriented, trying to help communities. And is there, you know, we have only a couple of minutes left in the program, but I just wanted to ask you if there was any sort of messages out there that you wanted to give to the viewers, or about climate change in general, or your own experiences and your own work.
Yes, so I would say more data collection is needed. I think our climate models are pretty good now. I mean, they are becoming so accurate and really good. We have the tools available to us, and so it's time to use it and implement them, actually. And a lot of engineers, planners, they're starting to use this tool that we talked about in order to help communities to protect them. I think you're going to need to take climate change into consideration now in just about any work you do. And pretty much all of the researchers at University of Hawaii and even in Alaska that I've met, higher latitudes, they all consider climate change now in their work. And then also local engineers and state agencies that I've worked with, they're considering climate change as well into their work. So this is a valuable
That's encouraging,
tool.
yeah,
Yes.
that's very encouraging.
Yeah.
I actually was going to ask you just that, which is that when you work with communities and when you work with agencies and so on, what sorts of challenges have you faced with regards to climate change? Are there people, I mean, obviously when you're working with the communities, it's very obvious to them that that climate change is happening and they need to do something about it. But how do you, what kinds of things have you found?
So with the climate change issues, so I pretty much kind of work with the data part of it, and then
Right.
doing the
Right.
design, I'm more in the
Right.
office type. I get to go out in the field and collect the data, which
Right.
was the exciting part. But I have been to public meetings, and I see there's a really big concern with the
Right.
communities.
Yeah.
In the high latitudes especially, you really notice it. But also in the low latitudes that I'm here, the physical processes, of course, are different than in the high latitudes. But there's still a concern. They're facing similar issues with increased storms, wiping out their coastlines. So
They don't always have the luxury of just leaving it be and moving away somewhere else.
no,
So,
they're stuck on an
yeah.
island, especially in
Right.
the Pacific.
Right, and so, well, that is really exciting work, and thank you so much for being with us today. And I just
Thank
wanted
you.
to actually close with a quote that I wanted to let everyone know about, which is economist Scott Barrett at Columbia University's Earth Institute. He was asked, why does he do this work? And he says, it was quoted in Columbia University's magazine, he says, because climate change is the biggest problem the world has ever faced, the greatest challenge of our time. Why work on anything else? And so that's what we're doing here, is working on climate change issues.
Yes.
So this is the last episode, but I will be back covering the IUCN's World Conservation Congress later this year, so stay in touch on Twitter at anu-hittel_hittel, or on our Facebook page, Climate Change Beyond Outrage. And we will see you then later this year. Aloha, namaskar, and goodbye.